Salutations. I am William Hamblin, and today we're going to discuss Fortress Rosecrans. When Napoleon invaded Russia on June 24, 1812, he took with him the Grand Army, consisting of some 453,000 soldiers. Eventually, this number swelled to 612,000 soldiers. Emperor Napoleon had been planning for months to conquer Russia, and at the time he had prepared the most intricate system of logistical supply then known to mankind. Famously, invading Russia in winter has not worked out for anyone. Only 112,000 soldiers of the 612,000 grand total returned alive from the effort. About half of those casualties were from issues relating to improper logistical supply. As Sir Archibald Allison quotes Napoleon as having said during the height of the Russian invasion, quote, "From the sublime to the ridiculous is but a single step," end quote. During the Third Crusade, betwixt the July 1191 CE Battle of Acca and the September 1191 CE Battle of Arsuf, King Richard the Lionheart had to move his 11,200 soldiers over 74 miles through enemy-controlled territory to his next target. As Nigel Saul writes, quote, "Richard's achievements on the crusade made him one of the most outstanding leaders of his age." Opposing him was 25,000 cavalry under the command of the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub. As the siege of Acca had led to the capture of most of the Egyptian navy, King Richard concocted a maneuver that would lead him towards his goal of the recapturing of Jerusalem. He arranged to march his army south from Acca along the Mediterranean coast with his cavalry on the inland or left flank, with a rank of crossbow-wielding infantry behind them, a series of fast response units consisting of 100 armed and armored knights, and finally, the baggage and dependents of the army were walking along the beach front. As water is the most valuable logistic resource in the area, and heat strain is an ever-present danger, he utilized the captured Egyptian fleet to guard his right flank on the sea and to carry his needed logistics in the safest possible manner. In this way, he arrived at Arsuf outnumbered by more than 2-1 and thoroughly defeated the Sultan's army. He lost 700 soldiers, the Sultan 7,000. And that's why we protect our logistics like we protect our lives. Because it does. During the War of the Rebellion, a campaigning field army had lots of requirements for maximum effectiveness. Reinforcements, ammunition, gunpowder, medical supplies, food, weapons, and so forth. After the Battle of Stones River, December 31st, 1862, to January 2nd, 1863, the Union Army of the Cumberland spent several months constructing the largest earthwork fortification that I know of in the Western Hemisphere. Utilizing a brilliantly set plan by General James St. Clair Morton, a series of lethal earthworks were set out replete with overlapping fields of fire and absolutely nothing available to hide behind, besides, or under for any force bold enough to attack it. From a total pool of some 40,000 soldiers, the construction utilized 4,000 soldiers on each 8-hour shift betwixt January and June of 1863. The Union Army decided to follow directly in the footsteps of Richard the Lionheart and invest in protecting their forward supplies. So was Fortress Rosecrans constructed. As James K. Huta states in the Tennessee Encyclopedia, quote, "The bastion fort covered an area of approximately 225 acres and consisted of 8 lunettes or artillery emplacements and 4 redoubts or interior strongpoints, like the keep inside a castle's walls. Linked by a series of curtain walls and abatis. Numerous buildings such as sawmills, quartermaster depots, warehouses, magazines, and quarters covered the site. The fortress was placed astride the junction of the Stones River and Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad, as well as the intersection of Wilkinson Pike and the Old Nashville Pike. Positioned as it was only a few short miles from the geographic center of the state of Tennessee and on a major road, with up to 10,000 troops inside, next to a major rail line and with enough supplies inside for a 65,000 soldier army to last 3 months, the fortress became an unassailable reality that the Union was and would remain in Middle Tennessee. As an aside, during this research, I discovered several things that I thought I would include at a much greater length. Instead, here's a short version of this. In doing the research on what an earthwork fortification can withstand in terms of, artillery, gunfire, these kinds of things, I found that there is an entire science surrounding the resistivity of soil to penetration or perforation, such as what kind of soil is being used, how thick is the area being struck, how much moisture does the soil in question contain, how cold is it on that day, what are the ratios of stone, loam, sand, and gravel. It's an incredibly intricate science to place a value on what kind of round an earthwork fortification can stop. For example, the main curtain walls of Fortress Rosecrans are 25 feet wide and over 12 foot tall when they were originally constructed. Trying to imagine a weapon that can penetrate 25 feet of any kind of earth leads you directly into bunker-busting munitions that were only developed within the past 100 years. If you drop a heavy enough bomb with a hard enough penetrating point from a tall enough altitude, it will go through an astonishing amount of earth, reinforced concrete, almost anything you can think of. And it will hurt whatever is inside pretty badly. In the time of the War of the Rebellion, these options weren't available. Similarly, there's an entire scientific field simply concerned with terminal ballistics, or what happens when something thrown hits something not moving. Or, something moving, depending on the exact thing you're studying. When it comes to this kind of study, you need to know such things as what caliber is the projectile being used, what velocity is said projectile traveling, what's the profile of said projectile, is it a round ball or is it a pointed arrow shape, what material was used in its construction. For example, in modern main battle tanks, depleted uranium is often used in fin-stabilized discarding sabot armor-penetrating rounds. Depleted uranium is used because it features a mechanical notion known as adiabatic shear band formation, meaning if you're trying to plunge a sharpened tip through tank armor, often the sharpened tip will mushroom and stop its progress through the armor that it's trying to perforate. Adiabatic shear band formation essentially resharpens the tip of APFS-DS ammunition on its way through an enemy tank's armor. It's pretty nasty stuff, and it's also radioactive, but if you want to plunge a hole through an enemy tank, it's about the only way to go. All of these fun mechanical engineering aspects aside, there was only ever one attack on Fortress Rosecrans. After the late November 1864 Battle of Franklin, Tennessee, and before the mid-December 1864 Battle of Nashville, during General John Bell Hood's assault into Tennessee, he detached Nathan Bedford Forrest and William B. Bate to together keep the Confederate soldier, or the Union soldiers, I should say, in Murfreesboro there. He didn't want to have more Union soldiers attacking him at Nashville because the situation was honestly already desperate enough. Lieutenant General Nathan Bedford Forrest took his men and decided to perform a reconnaissance in force on Fortress Rosecrans. And during this, he discovered that the fortress would be absolutely suicidal to attack head-on, and he had absolutely no illusions of that being the fact. Instead, he attempted to lure the Union defenders out of the fort so that he could encircle them and destroy them piecemeal. What wound up happening was he pulled the Union soldiers out of the fort, and they ran roughshod over the force he had available. At one point, the Confederate soldiers broke and ran, and General Forrest went into the midst of the running soldiers and implored them to stop, entreated, begged them to turn around and reform their lines and continue fighting. When he noticed that they were all following a flag bearer for that unit, he pulled out his pistol and shot the man dead. The soldiers were so terrified of what was occurring that even after watching their fellow soldier get shot dead, they did not pause for a single instant and instead continued kicking rocks back towards the main army of Tennessee and its very soon ridiculous defeat at the Battle of Nashville. Um, Fortress Rosecrans was incredibly important, and it did very important work. And the parts of it that still remain today are a symbol of Americans' refusal to be split over an issue, something we could use in this day.